Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're going to be tackling something, well, pretty central to a lot of folks' faith, Holy Communion.
A great choice. Always fascinating to explore.
Yeah, we've got this message from Reverend Raju Josiah from, I think it's FBGL Ministries over in India.
Oh, interesting. I haven't come across his work before.
Yeah, it's called Holy Communion, Christ's Sacrifice and Its Transforming Power. Should be insightful. So whether you've been taking communion your whole life or just kind of curious about what it's all about, I think you'll find this deep dive, well, pretty interesting.
Definitely. It's a ritual with centuries of history and tradition behind it.
Yeah.
Millions of people still find it meaningful today, so there's got to be something to it, right?
Exactly. It's like what gives this ritual such staying power? Reverend Josiah kind of breaks it down into three main things to consider. The meaning of communion itself, the power of Christ's sacrifice, and, well, the potential for it to actually change you.
Okay, sounds like a good roadmap.
Yeah, so first up, meaning. Josiah draws this really interesting parallel between communion and the Passover meal, from Exodus, the Israelites fleeing Egypt, lamb's blood, all that.
Right. That's actually a really common comparison. Both meals use these physical things like bread and wine in communion or lamb's blood back in Exodus to represent something way deeper.
You mean like in Exodus, the blood was about protection, right? And the whole meal was like this covenant with God, promising freedom.
Exactly. And then with communion, you've got the bread and wine representing Christ's body and blood, right?
Yeah.
Symbolizing the sacrifice that, well, it offers a different kind of protection from, spiritual death.
So it's like that same idea of a covenant, but instead of freedom from physical slavery, it's the promise of salvation through Christ.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And it's interesting because both meals are about way more than just the symbols themselves. It's about actually participating in this story, a tradition, a whole relationship with God or the divine, however you want to think about it.
That actually makes me think about how communion is celebrated differently across, different denominations. Some folks believe the bread and wine literally become the body and blood, while others see them as like symbolic. What do you make of all that?
Well, I think it kind of shows how rich and complex the whole thing is, you know? There's not just one right way to do it. Ultimately, though, it seems like the focus is always on remembering and connecting. Connecting with Christ's sacrifice, with other believers, with this history that goes back, well, centuries.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit,
Yeah.
let's talk about that sacrifice itself. Our source, he really zeroes in on how powerful it is. There's that line from Isaiah 53.5, I think, that says, "He was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed."
Oh, powerful stuff. That verse gets right to the heart of what atonement means. The idea that Christ's sacrifice, wipes the slate clean, resets things, gets us back in good standing with God.
So atonement is like hitting the reset button on our relationship with God.
Yeah, exactly. It's about reconciliation, bridging that gap that sin creates. And we see this theme of sacrifice leading to atonement all over the Bible. The blood of the lamb back in Exodus, the sacrifices in the Old Testament, and, well, ultimately, Jesus' sacrifice.
Definitely a recurring theme there. But Reverend Josiah, he goes a step further, right?
Yeah.
He talks about this transforming power of communion, shares stories about people experiencing actual healing, deliverance, breakthroughs, all because of taking communion.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how a ritual can have that kind of impact. Makes you wonder about, well, the power of belief and maybe just that deep human need to connect with something bigger than ourselves.
I mean, that's what blows my mind too, that a ritual can be a catalyst for real tangible change. Do you think it's all about faith though, or is there something more to it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, rituals in general, there's a psychological aspect to them, right? They can bring order, focus, intention. And with communion specifically, it's not just you by yourself, right? You're joining this community, making a statement of faith together, kind of reaffirming those shared beliefs.
It's like that line from Corinthians, right?
Yeah.
For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes. Pretty powerful stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It really drives home that sense of unity, of shared belief. And, tying it back to everything we've been discussing, I think it kind of highlights why this ritual has lasted so long. You've got this ancient practice, layers of symbolism, a deep connection to, well, to history and this potential for real personal transformation.
Exactly. It's no wonder Holy Communion is still such a big deal for so many people.
Yeah, and it makes you think about, well, the power of ritual and symbolism in general, how they shape our understanding of the world, our beliefs, even our own experiences.
And I think that brings us to a final thought for our listeners today. What about your life? What are the rituals you practice, and what kind of meaning do they hold for you? Do they connect you to something bigger? Offer a sense of purpose? Maybe even inspire some kind of change? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.